Arcade Heroes.
Hey everyone, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com, and for today's versus match between console and arcade, I'm tackling Minecraft Dungeons. As you can see on the left, I will be using the Nintendo Switch version, whereas on the right, I will be using the coin-operated arcade version. And here you'll be able to see what makes both the games different from each other. Now, my son is much more into Minecraft than I am. Usually the only reason I play Minecraft or anything Minecraft related is because my kids ask me to. And so if you want to see more stuff about Minecraft or Minecraft Dungeons, then check out his channel. But for the arcade version, you can check out mine, and I've had footage before as I'm kind of showing there of the arcade version and how it works. And the biggest difference between this and the console version would be the use of cards and collectible cards. And while I don't know how much the cards go for on eBay or among card collector circles, I imagine that they will have some value at some point if they don't already have some. And of course there's different rarities of cards. Right now they are on Series 1, where you have 60 different cards, and down the road they'll release Series 2, Series 3, and add more cards with more rarities to it, which they've done with other games like Injustice. Now, again, another thing that's different between the two are load times. I've had to do a lot of editing on the console version, so there's a lot of skips there. On the maps between the two, didn't get a lot to look at the arcade version there, but it's pretty simplified. It's more arcade style, just 9 levels to choose from, whereas on the console version it gives you a bunch of different levels over that isometric map, and you can change the difficulty on it as well, whereas players cannot change the difficulty on Minecraft Arcade. Of course, operators can make some adjustments there. And then also when the levels start, you have some narration on the console version and those cutscenes, whereas on the arcade version you do get some cutscenes spiced throughout the gameplay, but there's no narration, unfortunately. I do hope that with the online upgrade system that they have present in the arcade version, which I know that probably sounds weird to be saying that something has online, because everything has online these days, right? Well, most arcade games don't, but Minecraft is one of the very few that does, and so they'll be able to possibly add new content to this at some point. So far, they've only done things like bug fixes and some other minor things like that, but I'm really hoping that they will add some additional content, maybe change certain elements, improve certain elements as time goes on. Now, as you can see here, there are very different games from each other, and so the console version, I've said this, but as I've thought about it, I need to make a correction. I initially said it's Diablo style, whereas really it's more Gauntlet Legends style. I mean, both games do support up to 4 players, but in Gauntlet Legends, it kind of had that thing where you would have 4 players on the screen, but there was a little bit more exploration involved. Whereas on the arcade version, it doesn't have exploration. It just kind of leads you through the path of where you need to go, and you just eventually reach the boss. Whereas on Gauntlet Legends, there was multiple paths to take, and with Minecraft Dungeons on console, it has those exploration elements to it. And as you'll also see me pull up on occasion, you can pull up a map. Of course, you couldn't do that in Gauntlet Legends, but the arcade version, there's no need to pull up a map because you're never going to get lost. You can't go off and explore other places, or like in the console version, it does have these caves or extra dungeons that you can go and explore, and it'll have events where you fight things like an Enderman, which turns the screen all staticky temporarily, where that's not in the arcade version. But the arcade version occasionally does have these kind of hints at bosses or that you'll eventually face, and so you can tackle them there. But overall, again, as you can see, very different games, and my understanding is that the console version does support 4 players at once. Of course, that's built into the arcade, but the arcade also has simplified controls. It has the card system to give it its unique style, and to touch on that for a moment, the arcade has an analog joystick, which is another unusual thing for arcades to have. And then it only has 3 buttons. It has the melee, it has the arrows, and it has the ranged weapon, and then it has dodge. Whereas with the console version, your buttons are mapped to the different items that you can use at any time. And again, the inventory systems are also very different between the two. And as you can see here, the console version, it has something that's more console-like, where you can go in, take your time to change out your special items, you can change your main weapon, you can change your armor, your ranged weapon. Whereas in the arcade version, since it's often a lot more difficult to manage inventory, that's just not really an arcade thing. That's where they came up with the card system for you to be able to do that. Now, my understanding on the console version, the gems are used just for purchasing new weapons at the merchants when you're back in the overworld, or whatever that may be called. And so, sorry if I'm butchering any of the terminology. But you can also enchant your weapons on the console version, which is cool. But with the arcade version, the gems are used to power up or enchant, so to speak, your different cards, and so that's what activates your animal, or gives you armor, or gives you the special weapon, or a special ranged weapon for a temporary amount of time. And that is one area where I hope that they make some improvements. It would be cool if they had maybe a different color gem to automatically power something up, or put in some of those jars that you could break to get some more gems, or something along those lines, just to, again, to make it a little bit more like Gauntlet Legends. The narrator, use the same narrator that they had in the console version for the arcade version, or someone similar, just to give it a little bit more character, since it doesn't have that. And of course also the console version has the TNT. I imagine that was removed from the arcade version just because when you have multiple players going at it, that can cause some havoc. So maybe they did have that at one point and just removed it just because it didn't work for what the arcade needs. And that's oftentimes why you're going to have a lot of differences between consoles and arcade ports, is just because certain things, certain elements don't work in the arcade, and especially if you have like a multiplayer style game where it's just not the same feel and creates a dynamic that makes it not fun where it might be fun on consoles. Of course, the same can be true vice versa, where you could have certain elements that are fun in the arcade that wouldn't be fun on console. And then of course there's the physicality of the arcade, and that's where you get to be able to collect cards, which is a nice thing too. Now, what we're going to get into here in a second are some boss fights. So, some differences between boss fights on console and arcade. The main one is, for some reason, they don't have the name of the boss at the top of the screen, whereas on the console version they do. So, like here you can see Corrupted Cauldron for one, but on the arcade it just says boss. So I'm not sure why that is. Now, it may have to do with the fact that Play Mechanics, the primary developer of the arcade version, did not use the console version, did not use the source code. They built everything from the ground up on their own. And by my understanding, they're also the ones that pitched the original Minecraft Dungeons arcade concept to Mojang, and this was years ago. And so just some interesting differences that you can see. But also with the console version, you walk around more, the camera stays focused on your person, whereas on the arcade version it stays a single screen. And you also have the dots on the console version which indicate when the things are going to change with the boss, whereas on the arcade version it doesn't have that. Of course, on both versions you have to fight all the minions, but it's nice in the arcade version that those minions will drop the different gems so that you can power up your stuff and help give you an advantage against the boss there. But of course, with the arcade version, since you can pick that stuff up, it lets you keep going when you finish, so you can keep exploring the level if you want to, but you have to find the exit to complete the level, whereas on the arcade version, once you defeat the boss, then it's done. And then, of course, there are also differences afterwards, like with the console version, there's a chest that you can open and whatnot. But the reason for all these is streamlining, keeping it a little more simple for the arcade, which is oftentimes what arcades need. And so when I hear a parent come to the arcade and say to their child, well, you have that on at home, why do you need to play it here? Well, as you can see from all this, they are very different. And of course you get to collect the card, which is also a nice thing, and you can resell that or just keep it in your collection with your Pokemon cards or other cards, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever else you might have. And so, yeah, check it out. If you come across it out there, it is showing up at more places. But thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more stuff on my channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.